Okay, so how does a fire protection contractor actually make money after the installation is over? If you picture this business, you picture a specific day. The crew hanging sprinkler pipe in a half-finished building. Racks of new heads waiting to go in. A project manager walking the floor with a punch list, while the building owner follows along, pointing at ceiling tiles and asking when the water test happens. Then the moment it passes. Water flowing through the new system, every head where it belongs. Everyone shaking hands in the empty lobby. Sounds simple. You build a system, you get paid, the job is done. That's the picture. That's what the industry itself likes to show you. Here's the thing nobody tells you. That day is the smallest part of what this company will ever earn. The real money starts the morning after, when the crew drives away and the building goes quiet. Because a fire protection contractor is not really in the business of building things. It's in the business of a legally required promise that never ends. And the story of how that promise gets made, how it can quietly make a company rich, and how it can just as quietly destroy one, is one of the strangest stories in all of commercial construction. By the end of this, you'll understand what these companies are actually selling, and you'll understand why the biggest installs aren't where the fortune is. To understand why the money never stops, you need to understand where the rules came from, and the rules came from a fire. In November of 1980, the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas caught fire. 85 people died. At the time, the building had no functioning sprinkler system covering the areas where the fire actually spread. The smoke moved through hidden spaces above the casino floor. The fire found the open atrium, and by the time it was over, it was one of the deadliest hotel fires in American history. That single building rewired an entire industry. Nevada, the state where it happened, moved fast and required automatic fire sprinklers in high-rise hotels and casinos. The retrofit wave that followed kept contractors busy for years, and the same story played out again after the Station nightclub fire in Rhode Island in 2003, which killed 100 people and pushed states to tighten sprinkler requirements for clubs and assembly spaces. In this industry, disaster writes the next decade of demand, but the retrofits are not the part that matters most. What matters is what came after. Because once a sprinkler system exists, the law says it has to be inspected, tested, and maintained on a permanent schedule. Not once, not until the warranty runs out, forever. That schedule is written down in a code called NFPA 25, and it tells building owners exactly what has to be checked and how often. Valves, gauges, flow tests, backflow preventers, the whole system on a calendar that never stops. Here's the counterintuitive part. None of that demand comes from the building owner wanting anything. The owner doesn't wake up wanting to pay a fire protection company every year. The demand comes from the law, and the law is enforced by someone with real power. A fire marshal can write citations, stall a certificate of occupancy, and in serious cases, shut a building down. That's the entire foundation of this industry. You are not selling convenience, you are selling compliance, and compliance is not optional. So a fire protection contractor is really running two completely different businesses under one roof, and they have almost nothing in common financially. There's the install side, a project business. A building gets built or renovated, somebody wins the bid, the crew shows up for months, the checks arrive in progress payments, and when the job is done, the project is over, revenue stops. The pipeline has to be refilled from zero by winning the next bid against competitors all trying to guess the job cheaper than you did. And this is why the install side is such a hard way to run a company. You don't get to set your own price on an install. You win a project by bidding low enough to beat the other contractors, which means your margin is decided before the first pipe arrives, by whoever guessed the job best. Then the schedule slips. The prints are wrong. The owner changes the scope halfway through, and the margin you bid disappears. Even when the job goes well, the money arrives in progress payments, and the last chunk, the retainage, sits locked up for months until the owner is satisfied. One big project that goes sideways can erase the profit from three that went fine. That's the construction gamble. Some contractors are great at it and still lose money. And then there's the other business, the one most people never see, the recurring side. Inspection, testing, maintenance, and repair. And this side is where the money actually lives. Here's the part that's hard to believe. The giant install, the one that took 9 months and a small army, is effectively the company paying for the right to sell the little stuff forever. The install is the front door. The inspection contract is the product. And the building owner doesn't buy that product because they want to. They buy it because the law says they have to, from somebody, and the whole game is making sure that somebody is you. Now let's walk through what that product actually looks like, because it's nothing like the install. 2 technicians, a van, a checklist. They pull up to a commercial building on a Tuesday morning and spend an hour in the mechanical room with the building's maintenance person. They test a valve here, read a gauge there, run water through a flow test, make sure the backflow preventer is passing. Every reading goes on the report. Then they do it again at the next building and the next. 3, 4, sometimes 5 buildings in a single day. Each visit bills somewhere between $300 and $800. There's almost no material cost in that visit. It's labor, a van, and a checklist. Industry reports say a well-run inspection route can carry gross margins in the 55 to 70% range, which is a margin most construction crews would kill for. That little van doing the boring work is more profitable per hour than the crew that hung all that pipe. Read that again. The glamorous job is the customer acquisition arm. The boring one is the margin. But here's where it gets interesting, because the visit itself is not where the real money is hiding. The visit is the sales call. Here's how the sales call works. The code says the system has to be tested and it has to pass. When the technicians run the test, they find problems. A valve that's seized, a device that failed, a fitting that's corroded and leaking. Every one of those problems gets written down, photographed, and turned into a repair quote. And this is the part that makes the whole industry work. The building owner cannot just say no, because the inspection report goes to the fire marshal, and the fire marshal's sign-off is what keeps the building legal. When the report says something has to be fixed, fixing it stops being optional. It becomes a condition of doing business, so the $400 visit quietly turns into a $3,000 repair. The $2,000 testing job turns into a $20,000 system upgrade. And this is why the companies that do this well are the ones that actually make money. Industry reports say the best operators convert somewhere between 40 and 60% of the deficiencies they find into paid repair work, and that repairs can add up to 20 or 30% of total revenue on top of the visits. The companies that skip that step, the ones that just stamp the report and move on, are leaving money and liability sitting on the floor of every building they visit. There's a longer cycle on top of that, and it's the reason the installation business never really goes away. Once a company has a book of buildings, fire protection systems don't last forever. After 15 or 20 years, the components start to fail, the technology gets outdated, the codes get stricter, and the same technician who has been inspecting that building for a decade is the person standing in the mechanical room when the owner finally realizes the system has to be replaced. That replacement is a real construction job, a proposal that can run anywhere from $10,000 to $500,000 per building. The inspector doesn't have to cold call anyone. They're already in the building every year, with a checklist and a report card. The system feeds itself. Install the system, inspect it forever, find the problems, fix them, and then one day sell the building a new system and start the whole cycle again. There's also a whole grid of smaller checks that fill the same routes. Backflow tests that have to be done every year, extinguisher inspections on their own schedule, fire alarm monitoring subscriptions that bill every single month. None of these are glamorous. None of them show up in the mental picture of the business. But they keep the trucks full between inspection visits, and they make the route denser, and density, as you're about to see, is where the margin hides. So now here's the question that separates people who understand this business from people who are surprised by it. If the recurring side is where the money lives, why do so many of these companies act like the install is everything? Part of the answer is that the install is what they can see. The other part is a misleading number. Companies in this space get valued on two different numbers, and the numbers tell completely different stories. The first number is the backlog, the pile of installation work already under contract. It's a big, impressive number. It's what makes a company look busy. The second number is the recurring book, the inspection contracts that renew automatically every year. And here's the part that flips the assumption. Industry reports say buyers will pay somewhere around 4 to 6 times earnings for a company that's mostly installation work. But a company where recurring revenue is 40% or more of the total can sell for 7 to 12 times earnings. Some go higher. Think about what that means. The company with the smaller, less glamorous numbers can be worth more than the company with the big cranes and the fat backlog. Because the backlog is a lump of work that ends. The book is a promise that renews. A buyer isn't paying for what the company is doing this year. They're paying for what the company will keep doing every year, for as long as the buildings stand. Now let's make that real, because a number on a page is not the same thing as a decision made in a conference room. Imagine a buyer walks into 2 different companies in the same metro on the same week. The first one has a warehouse full of pipe, a crew of 30, and a backlog of $10 million in signed install work. The owner is proud of the backlog. He's been chasing it for years. The second company has a smaller shop, 8 trucks, and a wall of maps covered in dots. Each dot is a building on an inspection route. The buyer asks about the backlog. The owner shrugs and says the backlog is about 2 million. But the routes renew themselves. Every dot on that wall is a building that has to be visited next year, and the year after, and the year after that, because the law says so. The buyer walks out of the first shop and writes a much bigger number for the second one. Same industry. Same city. The company that looks smaller is worth more, because the work on the wall doesn't end when the contract is signed. It ends when the building comes down, which brings us to the two things that actually decide whether that book compounds or leaks. The first is labor. Fire protection work runs on licensed, certified technicians. In most states you need a license to do this work, and the certifications that say a technician actually knows how to design, install and test these systems are genuinely scarce. The companies that win this game treat their certified techs like gold, because the same few people who make a route work could also be making more money on the install side. And here's the trap. When the install schedule gets hot, the temptation is to pull the service techs onto the construction site. That fills the backlog. It also starves the inspection routes, which is where the margin lives. The businesses that do this well protect the service side with a fence, because the day you strip the route to feed the project is the day you start giving away the actual company. The second thing is route density, and this one is easier to see with 2 trucks than with any spreadsheet. Picture 2 vans leaving the same shop at the same hour. The first van heads into the city. Its route is a tight cluster. It pulls up to a medical office building, spends 45 minutes in the mechanical room, drives 9 minutes to a bank branch, then a warehouse, then a school, then a small clinic. 5 visits before 2 o'clock. The second van heads out to the county. Its stops are 40 minutes apart. It does 2 visits all day, and the driver spends most of the afternoon watching the odometer. Same crew, same van, same checklist. Industry reports say the dense route can produce $2,500 or more per truck per day, while the sprawled route might struggle to clear $1,200. The only difference is how much of the day is spent driving past fields instead of walking mechanical rooms. That windshield time is a silent tax, and it's why 2 companies in the same city with the same number of contracts can have completely different results. Now here's the part almost nobody sees coming, and it's the reason the recurring machine is not a cheat code. The book can break. Walk through what that looks like in one building, because it happens 1,000 times a year without making any news. A small office building gets a sprinkler system in the early 90s. A contractor installs it, signs the inspection contract, and for 15 years the same van shows up every spring. The valve gets tested, the flow test gets run, the report gets filed, then the building gets sold. The new owner's property manager takes over, looks at the contract on file, and decides to shop it around. 3 companies bid. The incumbent wins some of those and loses others, not because the work was bad, but because the new owner wanted a cheaper number, or a friend of the property manager, or just a fresh start. A book that took 10 years to build can lose 1/3 of its buildings in a single year of commercial real estate turnover. Nothing about the work changed. The building didn't burn. The system didn't fail. Somebody just bought the building and decided to shop the contract around. There's a quieter way the book breaks, and it takes longer to notice. It's the underpriced contract. The inspection agreement is a long-term bet. If you lowball the bid to win the building, and the system is older than you priced for, and the deficiencies are worse than you estimated, that contract bleeds money for years while you keep showing up to fulfill it. The margin you thought you were buying turns out to be someone else's problem. You don't find out until you're 2 winters in, and the building has needed 3 times the repairs you budgeted, and you're locked into a price you can't raise for another 3 years. And then there's the way the book breaks that destroys more of these businesses than anything else, and it doesn't look like a failure at all until the very end. The owner. A lot of these companies are one-person shops, where the owner is the only licensed technician, the only salesperson, and the only salesperson, and the only person who knows where the routes are and who owes what. The business looks alive. The trucks are in the yard, the phones ring, but it's built entirely on the owner's back. When the owner retires or gets sick, there's nothing to sell. The book is not transferable because the customers are loyal to a person, not a company. The whole machine dies with its owner, which is exactly why the buyers who pay 7 to 12 times earnings are not buying the trucks or the backlog. They're buying a book that will survive the current owner leaving. Let's see what all of this looks like side by side, because the difference between these 2 paths is the whole business in one picture, and the pattern repeats across the industry, in city after city, with 2 contractors who started identical. Imagine 2 fire protection contractors starting in the same city, same year, same size, Company A and Company B. Company A is the classic installer. They chase the big projects. They build a reputation for hanging pipe fast, they grow a crew, and by year 5 they have a serious backlog. The problem is the backlog is a treadmill. Every time they finish a project, they have to win a bigger one to keep the crew busy. Their revenue is lumpy. Their cash flow depends on a pipeline of bids that can dry up when construction slows. In a slow year, they lay off crews, and the best techs don't come back when the work does. They train new people, eat the cost of their mistakes, and start the cycle again. Company B does the unglamorous thing. They take the same first installs, but they treat every one of them as a customer, not a project. They lock in the inspection contract before the punch list is signed. They staff the routes with their best techs. They convert deficiencies into repairs, and they never let the install schedule cannibalize the service side. Their revenue isn't lumpy, because the service book fills the valleys between projects. Their best techs stay, because the work is steady and the routes are dense. Now put both of them in year 4 of a bad construction year. Company A's project pipeline has gone quiet. The estimator is chasing bids that aren't coming in, the crews are on half weeks, and the good techs are fielding calls from competitors. Company B's phone is still ringing, because the inspection calendar doesn't care about the economy. The valves still get tested in January. The flow tests still get run in June. The deficiencies still get fixed, because the marshal still signs off. Same city, same economy, opposite seasons. 10 years later, the picture is completely different. Company A has had good years and bad years, and it's tied to a construction cycle it doesn't control. Its value is a multiple of whatever the current backlog happens to be, which can change from quarter to quarter. Company B has a book of buildings that renews automatically, a route map that's dense, a team of certified techs who stay, and a company a buyer could actually take over and run. The two companies started identical. One built a job, the other built a machine, and the market, when it comes time to buy, knows exactly which one is worth more. So does owning a fire protection company actually work as a business? The honest answer is yes, but only if you're willing to be in a very specific business. If you treat every install as the end of a project, you're running a lumpy construction gamble with a payroll. If you treat every install as the beginning of a relationship the law will force to renew, you're running a compliance route with a construction arm attached. In the optimistic scenario, you've got a dense route, multi-year inspection contracts that auto-renew with price escalators built in, a disciplined workflow that turns found deficiencies into paid repairs, a service side that's protected from the install schedule, and a book that will survive you leaving. That version compounds quietly for decades. It pays the bills in January when construction is dead. It pays them in the slow years when nothing is being built. And it's the version that makes these companies some of the most durable small businesses in commercial construction. In the realistic scenario, the same business can lose a chunk of its book in a single year of ownership turnover, bleed margin on an underpriced contract for years, or die on the owner's retirement because the whole thing was built on one person's back. The difference between those two outcomes for the same company can be the difference between an asset that appreciates and a job that ends. Neither scenario is exotic. Both of them happen constantly in the same city to companies that looked identical on day one. The building didn't change. The code didn't change. The economics underneath them did. Here's what I want you to understand by the end of this. A fire protection contractor looks, from the outside, like a construction company. It looks like pipe, and sprinkler heads, and cranes, and big crews on job sites. That's the picture. It's the part you can see, it's the part the industry itself likes to show you. But the business is not really the pipe, it's the obligation. Every commercial building in this country has to buy inspection, testing, and repair from someone, every year, forever. The law guarantees the demand. The only question is who collects it. The big install doesn't make the company, it buys the company the right to collect. So when you picture that crew driving away from a finished job, understand what actually just happened. The construction is over. The business just started. Because the building owner isn't really paying for a system. They're paying for a promise that never expires, and the contractor who owns that promise, who renews it year after year, is the one the whole industry is really built on.